Fantastic. Take it away, Matt.
Hi, welcome to the CNAB Community April 10th, 2019 call. We had a little hiatus last week because of scheduling conflicts and stuff like that, but I think we're back and on track again today. It looks like we have a pretty good-sized agenda today. Yeah, we have a great agenda today. Typically, we kick off by allowing anybody who's new to the group to either unmute and introduce themselves or to drop in an introduction in the chat. So I'll give a moment of pause if anybody wants to introduce themselves this morning. Okay. All right, I think we can dive in. Do we typically go around the room and do updates in this meeting? This is what happens when I take a week off. I think we tend to do that at the end. Does anybody have a demo that they wanted to do? There's nothing on the agenda, but we usually do kick off with a demo if anybody has one.
I had one. I thought I put it on the agenda actually, but maybe I'm looking at a different agenda.
Oh, it is. It's right there. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong agenda. That is it. Yeah, go ahead, kick it off.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so this is a draft PR against Duffle that's doing image relocation. So let me just, if you want to take a look at it, it's on my remote, Glyn/Duffle. It's on a branch. And then it just can be made like this. And I've put together a test. Let me just show you the test data. So I've got a test bundle here, which has got some images. And the jury's out about whether we relocate invocation images. I'm assuming not for the moment, but that can be added later if necessary. It's still a draft PR. I've got 3 images here. One's an OCI image. One's a Docker image and one's neither OCI nor Docker. So that does the relocation. So the relocation command takes a repository prefix and it sticks that on the front of every image name essentially. And it publishes the resultant images to the corresponding repositories. So we can see that here it's pushed 2 images, it's tagged and pushed 2 images. The first one went to this, the second one went to that. So that's kind of, it's transformed the image names, it's pushed them up to the repository. And if I cap the JSON file, that's resulting. Okay, so one thing to explain is the command can either take a bundle in Duffle's own internal storage and produce another one, or it can take a file and produce another file, or any combination. But in this case, I took a file and produced a file for simplicity in the test. So the outputs, the only change in the bundle really is the images map. And so here in A, B, and C, we can see that C hasn't been changed because it's neither Docker nor OCI. So this PR doesn't address relocation of other types of images. It's really handling Docker and OCI images. And it's put the mapped image names in the image element and the digest in the digest type is preserved. And the jury is out with a spec PR about whether we capture the original image name. So that's something else to add, and possibly the original digest, but we'll get onto that later. Any questions?
So then the idea is you would be able to feed this image map back in during an install?
Yeah, sure. That's the idea. So if there were things like, in our use case, if there were things like Kubernetes manifests that had image names in them, then the install step could then take the image map and translate it across to get the to refer to the mapped images. Okay, the number of questions, I'm done.
All right, yeah, thanks very much for that demo. This has been one of the, for those of you who are newer on the project, this has been one of the harder things we've been trying to slog through over the last, probably 2 months now, is how to handle these probably longer than that, how to handle these image rewrites. So this is very exciting to see progress being made on any facet of that work, because it's been a big problem to try and solve. In fact, I think there's still like 2 more agenda items on that. Did anybody else have a demo that's not on here, now that I'm looking at the correct agenda? All right, I think we can proceed sequentially through them, through the list. So that's relocation design is the next up, followed by some image map questions, thick bundle one, proposal to change the frequency of this meeting, and then a couple of check-ins on some existing PRs, the JSON schema PR and the CNAB bundle one. So Chris, do you want to introduce the relocation design? Chris is on here, right? Yeah, you are. You want to introduce that one?
Yeah, actually, and I don't think I've introduced myself yet because I've usually been on the road during the meeting time. But my name is Chris Green. I'm on the Azure Global team for Microsoft as well as a bunch of other people. And that really means that I work mostly in regulated industries. So that's where the thick bundles and things like the cryptographic assurance, things like that really come into play, and then kind of mapping those to the actual, regulations, especially around banking, healthcare, is really where CNAB jumped out. I kind of piled on Matt about 4 hours after the announcement saying, hey, I really want to talk about air gaps and cryptography. And Matt went, you're incredibly boring, but I would love to talk about that. So, so I wanted to kind of talk about this in meetings. We've had a couple different issues, both in the duffle and CNAB, as well as in the chat. And you kind of alluded to it, Matt, that I think this relocation concept has kind of come into formation. Glyn, has done all the hard work of actually, building it and kind of seeing that shortcoming and closing it. But I wanted to kind of step through the current assumptions as we're kind of marching forward and, see if someone yelps or gets a really ugly look on their face, they don't agree. I think the kind of the core beginning is that we want to, in regards to thin and thick bundle, ideally the invocation images are able to be run without having to know if they're being run thin or thick. And I think the enabler for that would be the relocation concept. And I think that's that's it's not how does Simon's name pronounced? I know I'm going to mess it up, but that's primarily what me and him have been talking back and forth. The two things kind of relating to that are, one, if we do that, then the invocation images can be completely unaware of if the registry name gets changed and it gets relocated. It just gets injected to the map. It has logic to overwrite that. Everything's great. Everything's dandy. Similar for VM, as opposed to going to Azure / Ubuntu default, it would be Azure / myUbuntu .image. Kind of the one part that this does draw out is that core of the relocation logic of I have things that are in the image map. I need to place them somewhere. The simplest being, push it to a new registry, create those rewrites, and then inject them into the invocation images. Is where exactly that burden stands. And then Simon actually kind of brought up, well, if we do this, does that then actually put us in a place where we don't have to include a lot of the thick bundle stuff because it will be inherent? And I think that's kind of the, it's still in its proto stages of trying to kind of see through this and talk through this, say, okay, is there a simpler end to this game, for lack of a better term? And I've pulled a few examples, like the Azure Gallery package is a good example of something that's used today with Azure Stack, and actually Azure Marketplace. Its shortcoming is it will list out all the things that it needs, but then you have to do a bunch of manual steps to download it. It has literally a script that will grep through, download it to an arbitrary folder. You need to take that folder, do a bunch of manual stuff, upload it to blob storage on the Azure stack. So I'm kind of seeing that as a, kind of an example of where not having the thick bundle case involved at all was a shortcoming. And then this also ties into the registry discussion that we kind of were debating back and forth with Steve Lasker, and he was kind of giving some background on that. And I think that is, the nirvana is, you're able to basically pull a CNAB bundle from a registry, arbitrary registry, do what Simon kind of called a DeepExport. We'll grab all the different things that are referenced in that image, pack it into that file, and then that file basically fulfills the requirement of the thick bundle without having to have really any alternative tooling. The only difference is you have a switch where instead of just referencing it, you pull all those referenced artifacts. And I think that kind of leads into the other question of, on the CNAB registry side, is a CNAB a thing that has effectively an index that references, image, VHD, tarball, or is a CNAB those things kind of wrapped into one opaque blob and then put into the registry? So I don't know if I don't know if we can reach conclusions at this point, but I kind of want to spell out where we're heading and where we're thinking. If anyone has strong opinions, I think a lot of this is going to be, here's the idea, let's try implementing it. Wow, that was a terrible idea, and kind of iterate from there. And I think, like I said, kind of the core thing that I walked away with is I think we're a lot closer to that thick bundle story without having to write specialized tooling around it, kind of if we think things through. So I definitely want to steer that direction, because I think relieving any burden is great.
So I chatted to Simon just before this meeting. Unfortunately, he has a conflict. He's definitely more useful on this subject than I am. But he basically said that if we could kind of have like for Docker images, you can do a Docker image save and a Docker image load, something like that kind of flow, where we can capture the registry representation inside a table of some sort, and then save that on disk, and then you can that'll be your offline version. I think having a single code path that uses the registry formats and makes that into a file would be a good way of handling this. So the idea of the deep export, we kind of have an analogy with Docker images. So I think that analogy works, and bringing it across would make sense.
Yeah. Interestingly, the image relocation code that I linked to under the demo does some of this work already. It does it pulls down images and stores them as an OCI image layout. So we use that when we're building our distributions, and then it can take the OCI image layout and a list of images and export them to registry and relocate them and that kind of stuff. So the mechanics are right there for OCI images and Docker images. I don't really understand the VM side of things, but it can't be that much different, surely.
Yeah, CNAB-to-OCI does the same. So the tool that Glyn showed, we have inside the CNAB-to-OCI repo. That tool also does a fix-up, which does exactly what Glyn's tool does, except it also does it for the invocation image. Well, exactly in terms of the registry operations. And it actually also pulls down. So we use it inside Docker app, which is open source. If you want to get examples of a flow that we have working right now, you can take a look there. It also caches the images inside your home directory. It's I think it's in docker/bundles, so you can see what this may look like from that perspective. We have the invocation image plus all the images on disk.
I think the other thing that came across from Chris was I do see the point of relocating the invocation image now, because for a thick bundle in an air-gapped environment, you may have no other way of accessing it. So it's good to get it out in the registry. So yeah, if we can make that happen, that'd be good.
Yeah, the other piece, and this is where maybe it's worth calling out separate handling or separate expectations for invocation image versus image. One of the things that I would like to be able to do is have invocation images be handled in a different registry than the actual images that are being used. That's mostly a separation of roles avenue. a lot of that is kind of tied to now people are starting to whitelist their registries. And then it's a case of if I have, all my worker nodes, running all my applications, I only want to whitelist that, and it can only get images from XYZ registry. XYZ registry only has those images. I don't think it's required, but it's a nice to have. And also I think part of this is kind of seeing where invocation images and images are going to kind of fork in the road. So I think at some point they are, because I think and this is something that I kind of wanted to pull out a bit more of is, we've talked about MSIXs as an example. Do we see those being kind of pulled out into the image map? Or like, what are the other things that we kind of anticipate being in that as opposed to the invocation images?
Yeah, I think we have largely remained silent from this point of view of the specification about what other things you would pull in, simply because I can imagine use cases for things like MSIX packages or VMs or, as of yet, unconsidered kinds of runtime images. That said, the burden then, when we talk about implementation, which is what we're talking about now, the burden lands on the tooling to figure out how flexible do we really want to make it. So practically speaking, I think it is, the number one success story has to be moving Docker and OCI images. Soon after that it feels to me like it would be awfully nice to be able to tell a similar story for VMs and for packagey sort of things that also get moved around in registries, right? Because what we're primarily concerned with are the large objects that have to get exported from one place and moved across the gap and imported into the other. Some things can just simply be rolled into the invocation image because they're, a 5K tarball or something like that. It makes more sense to just treat it as an immutable object inside of the invocation image. But I think we're going to have to, together as a community, kind of gradually identify which class of things belongs in the image list and should be managed by that, and which class of things can just be comfortably wrapped inside of an invocation image or some other image and kept there. Does that make sense? I was basically dodging the question. I just want to make sure it was.
No, I think that was a place where I kind of landed, where I look at it as OCI and container images have their act together because everyone kind of got together and agreed on a lot of things. Like VMs is just, it's painful right now because even if you have a VHC that can run on two different clouds, it's a completely different library to upload to one cloud or the other. So even if we just say, hey, OCI has first class, citizenship, and then kind of work our way down the list as requirements dictate. So I think that was kind of the other thing is in the air gap requirement, one of the things that you might end up doing is standing up a registry as one of your first things. So that may just be in a good case of that would be where dependencies would come into play of, you either have to give it the registry or use the VM CNAB to stand up a registry. So yeah, I think we could start exploring that use case and kind of ferreting that out. But I think, I agree where you're at. And I think this is also kind of tied to kind of the artifact registry work that Steve last year is doing, where I think really, CNAB might end up driving that work and vice versa. So I think that if we kind of peek over the side of what they're doing, I think they'll honestly lay out the artifact types that we should care about kind of alongside it.
Yep. So on the broader story that just kind of came up, it sounds like Glyn and Chris it's great to have a meeting with only one Matt but multiple of some other name. We're largely like thinking along the same lines, right? So if we're in agreement, then that's at least a route that we want to explore and choose to discover whether it will adequately satisfy the operational conditions, and then we can roll it back into the spec. I think we should consider ourselves unblocked to do that. Does that sound fair? And you guys feel comfortable communicating either via Slack or other ways to kind of and issue queue to kind of tease out how these things might work out?
Yeah, I'll probably take it and kind of work with it and keep it driving forward on that. But yeah, I think at this point, we've all kind of worked through our assumptions. I think half of us thought we were jamming tarballs into invocation images when we first started, and now we're all kind of on the same page in that regard.
Yeah. And Michelle, I know you've worked a lot on the import-export logic. Is there anything in here that sets off early alarm bells, or are you cool with things moving on?
No, this sounds really good. I'm really glad to see like consensus on the relocation story too, and like hear a little bit more about the use cases. That's like very helpful. I was wondering, we were chatting yesterday with just a few people, and I was wondering if perhaps it makes more sense to have, instead of like a images section in the spec, to have the images as a specialized parameter. Because an image is something that you are referencing. So an invocation image is different. An image is an image you're referencing within your logic, per se. You might want to grab like an image to deploy within your Kubernetes cluster, or do XYZ with Docker app. And so, with the import-export story and the relocation story, from a duffle perspective, I've been thinking about how we want to actually figure out which images we want to import and export. And right now that is easy because we have an image map. But when the relocation story kind of hits, that makes things a little bit difficult in terms of like, I don't know where exactly I want to replace the reference of the image within my invocation image. And it's easier to do this kind of thing with parameters because they get passed in as environment variables by default. And so I can do the invocation image, do the image relocation logic. That's something that, like, say the runtime could be in charge of, but then that could get injected as a parameter after it gets relocated, so that the invocation image can use it to do things like install, uninstall, or whatever it needs to do. So I have a to-do item to write a proposal for that. If it makes sense, then we can talk more about it in the Slack channel. Just something to think about.
So if I can repeat that back to you and see if I understand. So relocating the images, like Glenn was showing earlier today, that's one step of the process, right? But then instead of having a separate images section in the bundle.json, we'd be treating these as like a specialized parameter type.
Yeah.
And then it would be the responsibility of the innards of the invocation image to figure out how to take that newly rewritten image as a parameter type and inject it into like the Kubernetes manifest or the Docker compose file or something like that.
Yeah, way clearer. Yeah, thanks.
One issue is that there's some structured data, isn't there, for each image? It's not just a new image name. You need to know things like the old image name.
Yeah, so I was thinking like we could use the default value to have the original image name. And then you could override that with whatever the relocated image is.
Right, but the invocation image needs both, potentially.
Yeah, so I'd have to read one out of the mounted bundle data and the other out of the parameters that come in. Yeah, so I think it's worth looking at doing a proposal and seeing if we can do it, or if we still need an image map as a separate concept, which we might. But I think it's worth pursuing and seeing if we can do it this way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we've solved this problem in Docker app because with CNAB-to-OCI we can move things around. So you can Simon or Sylvain will be good sounding boards for this proposal. If it simplifies things, that'll be awesome. But I just know that we have solved it, so it is possible with what we currently have as well.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I think Butcher just said it, but like something to think about is, what scenario is the image map good for right now? What exactly do we need it for? And then I can present this proposal, or I can submit this proposal, and then we can talk more about whether it simplifies things.
Yeah, so I know Glyn will be very interested in this, and probably Simone as well. Anybody else want to make sure you get CC'd on the proposal?
Yeah, I'd like to hear about it. I think that, like, to me, it makes sense that the the specifics of like the relocated image paths would end up showing up as a parameter just because the life cycle of those particular pieces of data align closer to the life cycle of an individual installation than they do over like the life cycle of a bundle per se. We see use cases where we're imagining that like given a bundle and a set of images, we're likely to see multiple sets of relocations depending upon where exactly you're going to install it, right? You can imagine scenarios where you've got different subnets that are air-gapped away from each other, but are all like reachable from the runtime, but not across the subnets. And then you can have a situation where each one of those things has a container registry and then you're relocating on an almost per installation basis. So then like at that point in time, the life cycle of those particular pieces of data is much closer to the parameter life cycle than what we have today, where it's kind of like globally for all bundles, this is what the image map looks like. So I don't know, aligning those things, there's not really like a technical reason you would do it, more like just logically it seems to align more with like the way the parameter life cycle, at least from my standpoint. So I'd love to hear more about your proposal, Michelle.
Awesome, yeah, I'll include you. Thank you.
I guess the other angle there, Ryan, is if you don't have to mutate the image map in the original bundle, then that might have some security benefits. Like if you signed it and so on, you don't have to re-sign it.
Right. That was a lot of stuff to talk about around all revolving around the image map and image relocation stuff. But this is exciting because this has felt like something we've wanted to do from day one and really kind of stumbled around trying to figure out the right way to do it. And I'm feeling optimistic that we're heading down the right path on that. Does anybody mind if we skip the every other week proposal for a second? Because given the flow of things, talking about the JSON schema stuff might be a better next topic to cover.
Yeah, no problem. I propose that. I'm good with that.
Okay. Ryan, I think you added this one.
Yeah, we have a PR outstanding to basically take what is currently available in the parameter section, which is kind of like a JSON schema-alike implementation, and actually just replace it first-class JSON schema implementation. So what this would mean is that for the parameter section, the expectation from a schema validation standpoint is that the parameters themselves are JSON schema like objects. And so you as a bundle author will be able to like actually write a schema declaration of what you would expect to appear for that particular parameter type. I think we get the advantages of all of the rest of the fact that JSON schema has got like folks behind it who've thought really hard about how to do this kind of thing. I think Simone did bring up a minor concern about some like the representation, say, of strings being passed in. We don't want to have to say that like every parameter as they get passed in is like a fully valid JSON document. I think that particular concern is like a runtime implementation concern. I don't think it's like something the spec should necessarily have to care about. But I just wanted to make sure that if there was something deeper to that I wasn't getting, that folks had a moment to mention it. And then also, if anyone has like general concerns about the overall PR, to check it out and comment there.
When I chatted to Simon just before this meeting, he brought up that it was just I think it's just the usability. It's just you don't want people to have to put quotes around strings, for example. So I think as long as we avoid that, he'll be fine with it. But yeah, he'll comment on the issue if he's quite vocal, so he'll let you know if he's not happy.
I think there was one minor breaking change that this PR introduces, which is that the metadata object goes away. Is that correct? Which I will take responsibility for. I'd actually meant to remove the metadata object a long time ago, and it was just one of those things that fell through the cracks. But it would be a breaking change, one that I think should be made, but hopefully fairly minor. So anybody who weighs in on that issue and has strong opinions about not introducing a minor breaking change like that, that would be a good thing to use to vote if that's gonna kill your demo at KubeCon that's coming up next month or something like that. Other than that, I'm actually I'll say it vocally, I'm strongly in favor of this because I think JSON schema is an excellent way of handling this kind of thing that gives us a lot of power. And also because the JSON schema spec did all the hard work for describing how this stuff works, we can basically just leverage that. Are there any other blockers on this one? So usability, I think Simone was right to raise it, but I think I agree with Ryan. Tooling, that's the job of tooling like Duffle to make the usability a better, for passing and command line things, for example, a better experience, and we can handle it in those environments. Is there anything else that people have seen in this that raises an eyebrow or introduces any concerns for them? All right, so I think silence means no. So we'll leave that issue there for commenting, but I think at this point we're really moving toward just agreeing, arriving at rough consensus or whatever for making this change. Is anybody particularly concerned? And this is totally cool. If you're concerned with delaying this until after the major block of conferences in early May, we can choose to defer this until then and just mark it as so. Is anybody particularly concerned about that for your demos and launches and things like that?
Well, I think if it's a problem, we can just vendor an older version or something like that. It should be okay.
All right. Okay, cool. That's great. I'm anxious to get that one merged in and going. Now I have to find the agenda. Okay, you want to go back and talk about the every other week thing and then end with a check-in on the CNAB bundle outputs?
Yeah, so my PR137 has been sitting there for a few weeks. I think that's the next one on the agenda.
I skipped that one, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Depends which agenda you're looking at.
I think I scrolled past that to the thick bundle one and didn't. So 137, you want to give an overview on that one?
Yeah, I think we're getting there with that one. It's fairly, it's the philosophy is that the image map should contain the before and after information so that the invocation image can read the image map and then do relocation as necessary. And obviously if we go a different route with parameters, then that's going to change. But for now, I think it's consistent with the current approach, and we could change it later if necessary. But one point that came up was that maybe the digest could change during relocation. It doesn't in my implementation, but it might do in other implementations. So we might want to include original digest as well as original image name, just to allow that to mutate. Other than that, were there any problems with that PR that people are aware of? Because it's been several weeks, and I'm wondering if there's an issue with it that's not being stated or something.
No, I read through it and I was ready to approve with the original digest field in it, just because I had the digest question. But yeah, the only reason I didn't was just so we could talk about the parameters proposal. But I agree, let's just go with this route for now. We've discussed it, seem to be in consensus within. If we want to change, then that should just be another proposal.
That's helpful because I can then add it to the relocate logic in Duffle. So that'd be good. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, Michelle, you want to take ownership on that one and get that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, you were about to say something.
No, I was just going to give I definitely want the original digest in there, just to be able to trace back, as in theory, if we ever get our collective act together with something like Grapheus or and all, that would be a way to say, that this was created from this image, and that might be the way of linking kind of the lineage of, this relocated image has a different digest, but based off this image map, I know that it used to be, Elasticsearch / has Sev1 vulnerability in it.
Yeah.
Just for the record, the only reason I didn't put that in originally was that my whole philosophy was that you preserve the digest. So yeah.
How can you preserve the digest?
Yeah.
I really have no idea, because if I do, if I push to a different repository, I get a different digest from the registry. And if I do a Docker save, and then I take the SHA-SUM, that I get a different digest if I change the repo of the image. So like how I would be really genuinely very curious, because if you have a solution, I would love to know about it. It would be so helpful in a lot of different places.
Yeah, it's in the image relocation code, the open source stuff that I've put on the link. But essentially, we depend upon Google Go Container Registry project, and that does mapping between registries and OCR layouts that preserves the digest all through. That's one of the design points. That's why I'm using it.
I'm so excited. I'll go read that.
We want our customers to be able to look at the digest of the thing they're running and see that it was the thing that we shipped.
Yes, 100%. I've been working on this for weeks. Okay, I'm really excited. I think I might cry. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll go look at that.
Okay, so that one, I think that's great. I think we're good on that one. So we still, I think, I'm doing a horrible job on this agenda. I apologize. So we've got changing the frequency of this meeting and then check in on the bundle output stuff. I think you did changing the frequency of the meeting, Michelle.
Oh, we can do real stuff first. Jeremy, you want to go with the output stuff? We're in a zone.
Yeah, sure. I had opened this PR to introduce outputs to the bundle. So you could say like my bundle creates an AKS cluster, or sorry, a Kubernetes cluster, and I need to get the kube config as like an output of that to reuse later on. So this PR introduces that concept. There were some like minor comments, but like nobody's approved it yet. So I'd be most appreciative if anybody could go and review. That's really it. It's been open for like a month, so just would love to have some reviews.
Yeah, send me that link. My bad.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, my turn. I was typing. Okay, so yeah, this meeting is every week, and I was just wondering I just wanted to check in on how everyone's feeling about that. I know a lot of us work on multiple projects and have meetings for a lot of different projects every week, or every other week. And so I was just wondering if, I just want to propose if we can adjust the frequency of this meeting to every other week, and do most of our consensus on Slack, or if we want to continue having weekly meetings and check-ins. So just wanted to check in here if anybody has any thoughts or any objections or any like things to say about that. Are there objections? Okay. We can still talk a lot on Slack.
Let's put it on you want to just put it up for a vote in Slack and see if and they get two votes for every person who's in this meeting now, and only one for people who, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, let's just vote on it in Slack, because I think reducing meeting load usually works well. And if we currently we have this one blocked off for a full hour, and if we're doing it every other week, that might make more sense to have 1 hour bi-weekly.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm always scrambling for focus time. So.
Oh no, I never have any meetings.
Only 25 a day. Okay, cool. There's a poll feature poll integration in the CNCF Slack channel, so I'll throw one up there now.
All right, so we've hit the end of the official agenda. Is there anything else people would like to bring up sort of ad hoc? And are there any decisions we need to for sure make before our next meeting? All right, I'll assume silence means no. Thank you all again. This has been, these last few months have just been great. I feel like we're tackling some incredibly difficult problems, but also these are the kinds of problems that I feel strongly are what makes CNAB an attractive offering in the field and an attractive solution. So thank you all very much. I know it takes a lot of patience to get some of this stuff through the issue queue, because we've got 2 ideas per person in the room that are always dueling. So it gets hard to iron through them, but I ironed through them, moved through them. But I feel like things are going very, very well. So thank you very much. This has been very exciting. That's a lot of varies, but I'm feeling the varies this morning. All right, I will see you all in 2 weeks then, or see you in the issue queue. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Right.
Thanks. Bye.